What are the top financial mistakes in divorce that people make? Well, the truth is there's a lot of them. But today in this video, we're going to talk about three of the biggest mistakes that divorcing people make. I'm Karen Covey. I'm a divorce coach and consultant, as well as a recovering divorce lawyer. And the reason that I chose these particular financial mistakes to talk about today is because just this week, I've worked with clients who were about to make exactly these three mistakes. And I didn't want that for them, and I wouldn't want that for you. So let's talk about what those mistakes are, and more importantly, how you can avoid them. Mistake number one is not making an accurate post-divorce budget before you settle your divorce case. Here's the deal. If you're going through a divorce, or when you're going through a divorce, you're going to have to fill out a financial affidavit. And that's usually a court form. And the financial affidavit gives the court some background information. And it also essentially is a budget and a balance sheet. And what that means is it's one part of it is about how much money you bring in and how much money you spend. The other part is about what you own and what you owe, right? And both of those are important in making a divorce settlement. But focusing in just on the budget part, what that financial affidavit requires you to do is write down what your income and expenses are right now. Well, if you're writing that during the divorce, which of course you are, it doesn't account for what your income and expenses are going to be like after your divorce. And chances are they're going to change. You may have to move your housing payment, whether it's a mortgage or rent, may be different. You're going to be presumably feeding at least one less person, maybe more than one if your kids are splitting time, or your kids are going to be primarily with your spouse, right? So you're feeding less people, but maybe some expenses are going to increase, or they're going to stay the same, regardless of the fact that your kids are going to be half time with you and half time with your spouse, right? So things like your electric bill, your water, your insurances, your blah, 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 those are going to stay the same. Some expenses are going to go down. Some expenses might go up. For example, health insurance. If you're on your spouse's health insurance, and now all of a sudden you've got to pay for insurance by yourself, chances are that's going to be a bigger expense than the one you've got right now. So if you haven't taken the time to plot that out before you make a settlement, you're not going to know whether you've got enough money coming in at the end of the, in the beginning of the month to make it through to the end of the month and still pay your bills. And the challenge is that most divorce attorneys aren't going to require you to do that. They're not going to say, hey, can you make this settlement? Did you make your budget? And are you going to be able to pay the bills at the end of the month after your divorce? Because that doesn't involve them. Your divorce is done by then. But if you don't know what you're going to need, there's no way you can settle for whatever it is that your spouse is or isn't offering right now, right? Or whatever it is you aren't offering. And mind you, the same thing applies regardless of whether you're the one receiving support, child support or spousal support, or paying support, child support and spousal support. If you haven't crunched your numbers to know that at the end of the month, this is how much money you're going to be left with, cash, not income that you're paying out in support, but cash in your pocket, you could leave yourself short, seriously short at the end of the month. So that's financial mistake number one, is not projecting into the future the numbers that you're going to need before you make a settlement. Financial mistake number two, and this is a hard one, I'm just telling you straight up, is putting your children's financial security ahead of yours, or your children's interests ahead of your financial security. Here's what I mean. So many people want to keep the house in a divorce, but if they haven't run their numbers and they don't know whether they can afford to keep the house after their divorce, they could be in a situation where they're house poor, where they don't have enough money to pay all the bills or to do the thing, to live the lifestyle that they want to live, because they're spending all their money on their house. And they did that because of the kids. Well, guess what? If you can't pay the mortgage and you have to sell the house after your divorce, or you put yourself in the position where you're getting foreclosed on, heaven forbid, after the divorce, your kids aren't going to do well with that either. And the same thing is true if you've decided to keep your kids in super expensive activities. I mean, yes, your kids might love traveling soccer and traveling hockey, and those might be great activities. But if there's not enough money to go around after the divorce to keep them in those activities, then you don't want to be in the position where you've got to sell your house to keep your kid in traveling soccer. That's not a good place. So you may need to have a tough conversation with your kids about, hey, we need to cut back, or we need to scale down, or we need to be mindful of what we're all spending so that we can make these numbers work at the end of the month. And doing that, I have to tell you, sucks. Nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to think that their divorce affected their kids' happiness or their kids' activities or their kids' lifestyle. But it is better, far better, to have your kids understand that and manage that reality, and maybe be angry or upset about it in the moment, but find a way to deal with it long term so that everyone can live a decent lifestyle, even if they don't have all the same activities. That's going to ultimately be better for them to learn those lessons now, rather than to have you struggle and have to work 6 jobs or be house poor or, sell things to pay for their activities. Ultimately, your kids are going to figure out the sacrifices that you're making. They may or may not appreciate it until they're in their 20s, but they may figure that out and then feel guilty about what they've made you go through. So it's like the oxygen mask in the airplane story, right? You've got to put on your oxygen mask first before you can help your kids. The same thing is true in divorce. Yes, you want to keep your kids' lives as much the same as you possibly can, but you also have to be realistic and not sacrifice your own financial security for, your kids' activities in the short term. The third financial mistake that I see people making is making settlement decisions out of exhaustion rather than from a place of empowerment and thinking, right? Here's what I mean. Divorce is a marathon. It's not a sprint, right? So your divorce is always going to take longer and cost more than you think. It's like construction. Kind of sucks, but that's the way it is, right? So at the end of the divorce, that's normally when you're talking settlement and you're trying to get things wrapped up and you're trying to make decisions and settle. And it's just, decision after decision after decision, and you want to be done and you just want to get your divorce over with. And that is when you're tempted to make mistakes. That's the time when you agree to do things just to be done, that 6 months later, you look back and you go, what was I thinking? Right? So the key to getting around that is to stay the course, to know what you're willing to live with and what you're not willing to live with. There's nothing wrong with compromise. And to get your divorce over, you're going to have to compromise. But you want to make sure that before you compromise on anything, you know what your top priorities are, and you are not compromising on those. You're compromising on other things. Make sense? So again, the top financial mistakes people make are not making a post-divorce budget, not knowing what that's going to look like before they settle. The second thing is sacrificing their own financial security for their kids, which is, altruistic and wonderful, and parents always do it, but you really need to think about what that's going to mean before you stick your foot in it, so to speak. And the third thing is making settlement decisions out of exhaustion rather than out of sound thinking, right? So I hope you found these tips helpful. If you have, give the video a thumbs up, and I look forward to talking to you again next time.